you're live now. You will be in the right. You're live now, Councillor.
Thank you, everybody. Welcome to the second online Bournville and Cotteridge Ward forum, online ward forum on Microsoft Teams Live. I'm Councillor Fred Grimrod, one of the councillors for Bournville and Cotteridge, and I'm joined tonight by my colleague Councillor Liz Clements. And we've got quite a packed agenda with lots of things, lots of issues covering an update on the pandemic, an update around the Places for People scheme. An update. We hope to be joined, if we can, if technology permits, by a colleague from Bournville Village Trust to give us an update on community issues, and then just generally an update from us councillors at the end. We're just a first reminder to if you are watching and want to ask a question, put that in the live event Q&A chat, and we will see it, and then we will we will get that answered for you by the speakers, or indeed try and answer that ourselves. But I'll just start off with a notice of recording that we are recording this meeting, so residents listening, participating in the online meeting, recording of the meeting will be available for future record. So the first item, I'd like to hand over to Dino Motti, our Public Health Registrar, to provide us with an update on the pandemic and in the city and what residents need to be aware of currently. Dino, over to you.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, I would like, first of all, to thank you all for welcome here today. Overall in the city, we're seeing what can be defined as an overall downward trend in terms of infections, which is reassuring, but the vast majority of wards in the city are actually stabilizing rather than coming down in a significant way. And this applies also to the ward of Bournville and Cotteridge. So we need to see more positive movement, and I think at the moment we're not talking about any change in regulations in an imminent terms. The intervention and the recommendations remain the same, and these are, let's say, short in hand, space and face. So these need to stay in place until a large proportion of the most vulnerable population have had 2 doses of the vaccine. And this, we have to be realistic, will take until at least the late spring. So although the news on the vaccine is extremely positive, and it is undeniably good news, we need to get help. We need to help the NHS and in order for us all to get through the winter. The transmission at the moment from the data that we have is still primarily linked to household transmission and household visiting. There is some evidence of transmission in workplaces and care homes, but there is little evidence of transmission between children in the same class in school. And most schools have single children in multiple classes who are not connected in terms of infections. So in general, what we're doing at the moment as a local authority, we're trying to help deploying testing. And just to clarify what testing is, in terms of technologies, we have 3 broad categories of testing, and I know the DPA Justin Varney has been saying this so that everybody understands the difference. So there are some testing that do testing for antibodies, and this is generally not what is very helpful, because we don't get the acute infection and then the natural resistances wane over time. So it is something that is done mainly at the moment in the domain of research. Otherwise, we have 2 tests that can detect an infection, which are PCR, which is the swab test that we've had over for several months throughout the first wave and up till now, which is sent to a lab and is good for finding even small amounts of the virus, very sensitive, so it's very good for early in the infection when we may have symptoms, but there is still not a lot. So while instead we now have some fast tests, lateral flow test, swab tests are used on site with a very small device, which are good at finding when there is a lot of the virus. So they are probably better at finding individuals who are very infectious, and they're not really good at finding those that have a limited amount of the virus. Otherwise, we all know we are in tier 3, and that means that you can consult it from the council website. In the government, there are a lot of exceptions, but it means there are limited commercial activities, and there is overall an advice to limit unnecessary travel. In terms of the Christmas bubble, we will see between a period that's been indicated a possibility for 3 households to gather up and form a Christmas bubble. That means that it's possible. It doesn't mean that it's zero risk or low risk. So this risk, that is the risk of bringing the virus within a family, maybe with some elderly relatives, can be reduced by self-isolating 14 days before forming the bubble. And this is what I would advise before engaging in travel to meet other members of the family, because we really want to make sure that we don't enter another resurgence of the virus. We're in the right trend, but as I said at the beginning, some wards are stabilizing, most wards are stabilizing. So there is the risk of a plateau and a resurgence. So it's very important that we all observe these rules, and also now that the flu vaccine is made available, take on the flu vaccine, which is different obviously than COVID vaccine, but the co-infection of the flu with COVID has been shown to be particularly nasty. And so we want to avoid that. And given that we have a flu vaccine and that's available, and to those that have access to it and they're on the list to be vaccinated, please do take up on that, because it's also preventing anyone from going to hospital with symptoms that sometimes are very similar to those of COVID, and obviously would engulf the NHS and create problems also for the patient themselves. And I think everything I wanted to cover. If there are any questions, I'm here to answer.
Thanks, Dino. Thanks for that really comprehensive update. Really appreciate that. Yeah, I had my flu jab a couple of weeks back, the first time I've really ever had one, but that went really well and really smoothly, and I think that's really good advice. I really appreciate that. One question from me. So obviously we're going into 23rd to 28th is going to be the Christmas period where we've got this allowance in terms of multi-household bubbles. We're currently in tier 3. Do you think it's likely, is it expected that we'll go back into tier 3 after the 28th of December? Is government going to be making new announcements at that point? Do we know?
I don't know, and I don't think we know. The point is these tiers are determined on a variety of parameters that have to do with the actual rate of infection, the rate of hospital bed usage, and a few others. And I think that doing a prediction for after Christmas is very hard at the moment. We all obviously would like things to go back to normal and everybody to not have to obviously be affected by the regulations. The point is that we want this switch to a lower tier to be permanent. We don't want to see what's happening in other parts of the country where maybe we went straight into tier 2 or we moved into tier 2, and this has seen like a creeping up or plateauing of the infection. So if we make an investment as a community altogether to bring down the infection rate, we want this to be sustainable. And that's why at the moment, I don't know, and I wouldn't be able to say when exactly this will happen. But we're all working to make sure that this happens in a sustainable way and that we don't come back to tier 3 after a short period of tier 2, because this will obviously create more problems than solve them.
Thanks, Dino. That's really helpful. I mean, Liz has also got a question to ask. Liz.
Yeah, thanks, Fred, and thanks, Dino. That was very helpful. In the light of what you were saying about thinking about trying to minimise risks over Christmas and the need to self-isolate, particularly if you're going to see vulnerable family members, do you have any observations for us on where transmission is mainly occurring? Is it in social settings or schools or workplaces? And do you have any advice for particularly families with children who may be planning to see older relatives over that 5-day period? And how should they be behaving over the next couple of weeks? Thank you.
So as I said before, the data that we have is giving us a picture where the transmission is still mainly linked to household transmission and household visiting, so within household and between households. And that is also at the root of what we are doing with the regulations in tiers and reducing the amount of travel and the amount of people and inter-household visiting, because that is what is driving at the moment the transmission. There is some evidence of transmission in workplaces and in care homes, indeed in care homes, but there is little evidence of transmission between children in the same class in school. And this is the data that we have. Obviously, it's data at the population level, so one always has to we see it at the population level. At the individual level, everybody is then entrusted and made responsible with their own choices. So the advice of self-isolating for 14 days before forming the bubble is an advice that is given to minimize the risk, because although as the council reminded, between the 23rd and 28th we have the possibility of forming a Christmas bubble, that doesn't mean that the risk is automatically erased. So the risk remains the same. There is a relaxation in regulations to accommodate for the festivity period. That doesn't mean that in that period the virus will not spread. If anything, we all obviously are concerned that it might spread more. That's why it's a limitation to 3 households, and it is exclusive, and there are also some restrictions for those residents of care homes that might visit outside. They have a different and a different form of regulation. They cannot form the same bubble with 3 households. So there are some restrictions around it, and this is done obviously to protect what the councillor mentioned. They are the most vulnerable in society, are our elderly relatives, which we are likely to meet at Christmas. And although again the regulation allow us to do it, they don't automatically reduce the risk. So it's up to us to make sure that we make this choice in an informed way, and we weigh the pros and cons of meeting with our elderly relatives at Christmas. And if we have to, and if we want to, obviously we all would like to, the advice is that of self-isolating for 14 days before forming the bubble to minimize this risk. In terms of children, obviously it is down to the fact that they might be attending class or doing activities with others, and it is a difficult choice, I must admit, Councillor.
Thanks, Dino. We had another question come through on the chat, and I've just got to navigate my way to that chat question. So the first one is from Stephen, who's asking why, if Sage and independent Sage say universities should be teaching online in order to keep the R figure down, why is Public Health England in Birmingham supporting blended learning and the movement of thousands of students across the country at multiple points across the academic year? So a bit of a difficult question, that one. I don't know if you can have a go at answering it, or whether we need to kind of also get some further information for Stephen on that.
I can gladly comment. The point is that I think maybe the person that asked the question doesn't realize that Public Health England Birmingham and the Public Health Division of Birmingham City Council are 2 different organizations. So Birmingham City Council is not Public Health England, and we're not advising this policy. Obviously, it is something that has happened. So students have returned to university, and that is the state of things. So I think that's what PHE is referring to at the moment. I don't have any further information. I haven't really followed the Sage advice or independent Sage advice at this stage, so I wouldn't be able to comment on the exact content of what they have written.
Right, can I say something? I mean, I understand Stephen's question, and obviously I'm, like everyone else apart from Dino, probably I'm a lay person in this discussion, and I want to follow the advice, but I have I was surprised, because I did understand that the Sage recommendation in September was very explicitly that universities should be teaching online wherever possible. Obviously, for some subjects, like lab-based subjects like engineering or hard sciences, and that would be practically difficult to achieve. But I'd have thought the vast majority of humanities and social science subjects could be quite well, not easily, because it's very onerous for the academics, but it could be taught online. But obviously that what the universities are doing in Birmingham, they are doing it in consultation with with Public Health England, and they've all got their own sort of COVID secure strategies. But I think a number of us have been, let's say, rather surprised by what's gone on, because obviously in our city we've got probably 80 or 90,000 students across the many higher education institutions that we've got, and I think that obviously carries with it a risk. On the other hand, if you think back, what it must have been like for the students starting university this year, how weird their experience was of the last year of their sixth form, and depriving them of any opportunity of face-to-face teaching in their first year at university, I suppose, would have been quite a big ask for the universities. But I do think there are some significant downsides. But again, that's just, I'm just stating a layperson's opinion there. I have no particular expertise, although I'm very, just because of people that I know, I'm very interested in the policy decisions that universities have made. Thanks.
Thanks, Liz. Another question that's come in from Chris Martin. What do the councillors think that the impact of the impending COVID/Brexit recession on jobs and employment in the ward will be, and how can we all play a part in building back better, try to spend more money locally, etc.? Liz, do you want to have a go at answering that question?
Yes, I'm certainly happy to kick off on that. And I think, obviously, in the midst of the COVID pandemic, we also have the ongoing negotiations for the Brexit and trade arrangements, and obviously they're a cause of concern for all of us, because we're living in a region where we have a significant manufacturing sector, the automotive sector, but also in our own ward and Cadbury's and the Bournville plant. So I think the outcome of this negotiations will be as crucial here as it is anywhere else, and there is a potentially very negative impacts on employment. So I think I noticed that that politicians across the spectrum said that they want there to be a deal, so that we shouldn't be crashing out without a deal, because that would be a catastrophe. And I think from Andy Street, the elected Conservative mayor of the West Midlands, to all our MPs, they want to see a deal. But in the end, we have to see what the outcome is. And in terms of what we can do, as a micro level, as residents, I think that supporting the local businesses that we have so many of in our area, particularly that retail and small independents, doing as much shopping with them as we can over the next few weeks, obviously in a socially distanced and COVID safe way, that will help. And I think we're lucky to have across this ward so many neighbourhood centres, Bournville Green, Cotteridge Centre, Celio, all of those places, and anything that we can do to take our custom to those smaller shops, I think will help. We had Small Business Saturday just at the weekend just gone, and a number of you may have seen that Steve McCabe, our MP, was out showing his support for local businesses, and we can all do the same. But I do think that the economic outlook for our neighbourhoods and the city as a whole is bleak at the moment. So again, when we come to the our councillor updates and the input from Cheryl Garvey, who's joined us from Bournville Village Trust, we can talk about some of the services that we can signpost people to if they're in need of help and support or advice on debt or employment and retraining, all of those sorts of things. Because I think it's just a very, very challenging time at the moment. We've all got to try and do as much as we can to help the businesses that are clinging on really to survival in our area. I can't offer much more than that, Fred, but it is a major concern. I think Chris is absolutely right to ask the question.
Thanks, Liz. I agree with you that absolutely really important question. Liz, I wondered if this would be a good item for a ward forum in the early part of New Year. Of the new year, because one of the things that I've become very aware of recently is that so much of the council's kind of work around youth unemployment, skills training, our initiatives around that were actually funded by the European Social Structural Innovation Funding system that we were part of, that the government has promised to replace, but we still haven't heard any details about that. And what surprised me was just how much is likely to of that kind of skills support and that youth unemployment support needs to be replaced really, really quickly if we're to keep those initiatives going. So I wondered if that would be something that we could talk about at a future ward forum.
Yeah, I think that would make sense, because I think that we know that so many people are at risk of losing their jobs or have already been made redundant, and that in Birmingham overall, we have a very, very large number of people who are furloughed. I think we have the highest proportion of furloughed employees in the country, and again, that's something that I know that Steve McCabe is very concerned about and has been making representations about. So anything that we can do to look at how all of that employment and training support that was previously funded by the European Social Fund, how that's going to be supplied in future, I think it would be very relevant. And also, if you think a lot of the employment and skills strategy is set at regional level now by the West Midlands Combined Authority, because they have the budget for adult education. So again, I think it would be maybe a time to invite somebody from the Combined Authority to join us at a future meeting if the residents who are dialing in also think that's it would be of interest. So perhaps could invite anyone to share their comments with us on the Q&A chat.
Thanks, Liz. Yeah, definitely. So I think that would be a really great thing, actually. So if you've got any thoughts, if you're listening and you've got thoughts about issues you'd like on Ward Forum agendas for next year, do drop them into the comments box. We'll note them and we'll raise them. We'll mention them as they come through, and then we'll try and organise those for future Ward Forum meetings. We've also, if you're just listening in and haven't got much to say but want to let us know that you're there, do also drop something in the chat. It feels very much like I'm running a radio show here, which is quite. I've got the right headphones and everything. So thank you, Dino, for your excellent presentation. I'll just ask if there is anybody got any final questions with regard to Dino's item or any issues arising from it. Then just drop those in the chat. We'll try and get those answered. But I'm going to give a few seconds. Nothing's popping up. No. Okay. If you've got a question, we'll still try and get it answered for you. But I'm going to move on to our next item, which is a bit of a continuation from the last Ward Forum. We're going to get an update from Joe Green, who is Birmingham City Council's Travel Demand Manager, talking to us about the Bournville Places for People update. We had a great discussion on this at the last Ward Forum, and I know there's been lots of chats, Facebook discussions, meetings, and various other things, online meetings, and over the course of the last 6 months. So, Joe, let us know where we are and what we can expect next year, and how people can get involved.
Fred, can I just interject briefly?
Yeah.
Kay Thomas, who's our committee manager, has said that if anyone's having difficulty joining via Microsoft Teams, they can get in via the web anonymously. I'm not entirely sure what that means, but she's asking you to just make that clear to people.
Well,
I don't know whether Kay can explain, or could Kay come in and just tell us how that works?
Great, Kay. Are you able to put it in the chat and I can read it out?
It basically is what I've just said. If people click on the button that says join via the web instead, and then underneath there's another little button to join anonymously rather than signing in with their own email address or their own name, that should work, hopefully.
Thanks, Kate. If anybody is still struggling, send an email to myself or Liz using our user email address. I've got my email running on the side here. We'll be able to kind of try and get the information to you. Joe, over to you. You're on mute, Joe.
Thank you, councillors, and good evening, everyone. I'm going to provide a brief update on the Places for People Bournville project and the wider emergency transport plan in terms of what's happened to date and also next steps. And then very happy to sort of move into any questions and discussion of this. So briefly, the background in terms of where the programme has come from. At the start of this year, we consulted on a draft Birmingham transport plan that was shaped around 4 big moves, one of which was prioritising active travel or walking and cycling in local neighbourhoods, supporting people to get around their area on foot or by bike, trying to address issues with cars and parking and dangerous driving, dominating street life where people live, go to school, etc., and creating local neighbourhoods where people are put first. Then a couple of months later, we moved into sort of an emergency situation around COVID-19 pandemic, and reshaped some of that draft Birmingham Transport Plan into the emergency transport plan, which is what we've been delivering over the last few months. It was based on the same vision and the big moves as the draft transport plan, but repurposing that to the situation that we faced this year with all the various restrictions in place. Still very much needing to ensure safe space for walking and cycling, but also at times and places enabling social distancing. Creating and publishing this emergency transport plan put us in a very good position in May, when the Department for Transport announced their emergency active travel fund, or is now active travel fund. It meant that the emergency transport plan could form the basis for our submissions to funding through that. And within the transport plan, there was a commitment to deliver a Places for People programme and 2 pilots, as well as looking at how this is extended across the city. And in terms of what Places for People is, it is around encouraging walking and cycling for these sort of short local trips where people live, but also to encourage different uses of spaces and neighbourhoods, so that children are able to play out, friends and neighbours are able to socialise, to deliver a number of benefits around cleaner air, a quieter environment and safer streets. And the main way in which all of those things are achieved is through less traffic, so seeing what we can do to reduce some of the car dominance from local areas. From July, we introduced a number of temporary pop-up schemes, which have now largely been delivered through the first tranche of funding. There's a couple of those that are particularly relevant to Bournville and Cotteridge ward. So one of them was to deliver a couple of early measures ahead of a wider Places for People scheme, and through that we've introduced 2 modal filters or road closures on Franklin Road and Oak Tree Lane, 2 locations that had previously been highlighted as areas where there was a problem with traffic cutting through the area, using it as a bit of a cut through. So by restricting that, we're trying to sort of create a more pleasant environment on those streets. But these were very much intended as early demonstration measures, and we are looking at a much wider rollout of this sort of approach now. We've also delivered a number of pop-up cycle lanes across the city, and one of those is on the A38 corridor between Selly Oak and Northfield, and as well as a light segregated cycle lane at the Selly Oak end. We have introduced a bus and cycle lane on the Bristol Road itself between Selly Oak and Northfield centres. Both of those 2 schemes have been delivered as part of this first tranche of funding. A couple of weeks ago, we started a full review of that whole programme and those schemes to look at how effective they've been, what impact they've had, and start to consider whether they should be made permanent, whether they should be changed or modified, or whether they should be removed. And this will sort of inform decisions around how we use some of the next phase of funding. That review will look at a number of areas. It will look at engineering issues such as traffic assessments and road safety audits. It will look at monitoring data, so some of the traffic counts, etc. It will look at consultation and feedback that we've had to date. And it will look at equality issues, so how certain groups and protected characteristics have been impacted by these schemes, benefits or challenges, and how that's taken into account. So a lot will sort of happen to review these schemes, and that will include the feedback that we have had to date, and we have had a lot of comments from people through the digital engagement platform Commonplace via various emails. And we are also now doing formal consultations through the Birmingham Be Heard website as part of the experimental traffic regulation orders that are in place for those schemes. So that sort of brings us up to where we are now. As of a couple of weeks ago, we finally got a funding allocation as part of the second tranche of funding. I say finally because we put that submission in August, and we were originally told we'd know early September. There were some delays to that, and that has had an impact on the sort of what comes next bit. But the good news is that we got everything that we requested. That the West Midlands Combined Authority is receiving over £13 million as part of this next tranche of funding, and that over £4 million of that is coming to Birmingham City Council for schemes that will be delivering. Something that has come along with that funding is a very clear steer from Department for Transport around a need for strengthened consultation requirements. Local authorities will have to publish consultation plans, undertake appropriate surveys with residents and other stakeholders, and clearly sort of demonstrate how that's been taken into account. That's very much in line with our standard approach, and how we usually look to deliver schemes. I think the reasons why that didn't happen as much as it would have done for the first tranche was the timescales, as well as some of the restrictions in place. But we're clear that there will be a very strong consultation element to that. We do need to commit the funding in terms of the schemes and measures to be delivered by the end of this financial year, but we have been given an extension in terms of when those schemes can be delivered on the ground to the end of March 2022, although in many cases it will be sooner. So in terms of Bournville, Places for People, what comes next? We're just about to sort of start engagement around what some of the opportunities are, the funding that's available, and to have sort of discussions around what things might be introduced. The phase 1 scheme has introduced 2 modal filters or road closure points to restrict traffic. And that could form quite a central part of phase 2 as well. So looking at where those sorts of traffic restrictions might be needed across the wider area to try to remove through traffic from the whole sort of neighbourhood. But that doesn't always have to mean just closing roads and putting these modal filters in. There's lots of other ways that through traffic can be restricted, whether it's one-way streets or no entry points, whether it's banning left-right turns, having timed restrictions, so no vehicles at certain times of day, or weight and width restrictions. And on some roads that are used for bus services, where it's not possible to close it physically, we can look at bus gates as one way of doing that. Alongside that, there's lots of other measures that we want to be able to consider in line with the issues within the area and what the problems or challenges are. So it may be that there's places where parking restrictions are needed, traffic calming, so we could look at sort of physical traffic calming through chicanes or build outs, speed humps and tables. Also looking at junction narrowing, a bit like we've done on Bournville Lane in Sturchley, to make it sort of safer. To look at places where people feel there's improvements needed to create safer crossing points, whether that's at side roads or across main roads, putting in refuges or even sort of signalised crossings. Alongside that, we do also want to sort of create people places, and that's one of the things we've tried to do with the initial measures on Franklin Road and Oak Tree Lane, is create places where people can congregate, obviously at the moment within current restrictions, but hopefully next year with a nice spring and summer, and the vaccine in full effect, we can start to socialise in our local areas a bit more, look at where we might have seating, planting and landscaping measures, street art, and also community activities. We've been working with both the Active Wellbeing Society and Sustrans to look at how we can create activity around these places, pavement widening to create additional space, put in cycle parking. So all sorts of measures that we may look at for the next phase of the scheme. The stuff along the bottom, school streets, 20-mile-per-hour speed limits and walking and cycling routes are things that we won't necessarily deliver as part of Places for People, but they are other things that the council's implementing that we'd look to deliver alongside. And then finally, just a couple of slides to outline a bit of the process and the next steps. What we are seeking here is an engagement process that allows local residents and other stakeholders to input and contribute at every single stage. So from the starting point in terms of highlighting what particular issues or problems there are within the area, putting forward ideas and suggestions for what's needed, carrying out formal consultation on that, and then delivering schemes. What we've established is a sort of a 5-step process for taking schemes and measures from the current situation to delivery on the ground. And to start and put some sort of timescales against that, where we currently are is we're just finalising the available budget and also the area extent for the next phase of Bournville Places for People scheme, and I think that should pretty much be firmed up over the next few days. So probably sort of early next week we'll be able to publicly share information around exactly what schemes, budget area, etc. is being taken forward. And then the first part of the sort of vision and values stage is really developing an understanding of the area and the changes that people want to see. Part of that will come from comments that we've already had, so through the Commonplace site and other means we've had lots of input, but we will be setting up various other ways for that to continue to happen, inviting suggestions and asking people to identify possible measures that could be introduced to benefit the local area. I think that's something that we're going to look to carry out over the next couple of months. And then alongside that, have a design partner on board who will produce proposed options, and that's where we'd look to do a formal consultation exercise, possibly including some short-term trials for a few days where it makes sense to try options out and see how layouts work. That will probably happen sort of around February half term through to March, probably run for a period of 4 weeks. And then towards the end of March, we should have schemes that can be implemented. What we are looking to do is, as we have with the current schemes, we'll still continue to deliver them on a temporary trial basis under experimental traffic regulation orders, because that approach does allow for changes and modifications to be made to things that go in. And with one of the pilot areas in Kings Heath, there have been a few places where changes have been made. We've relocated one of the measures, we've made adaptations. So the benefit of the experimental TRO approach is that we are able to continue to consult and engage even when things are on the ground to make those sorts of tweaks and everything. So yeah, where we currently are is just getting to a place to launch the next phase of the Bournville Places for People scheme, to look at what it is that we can introduce across the area to bring about this environment where people feel able to walk or cycle for local trips where they can, but also where places feel nicer for socialising, for spending time, and less dominated by through traffic. So hopefully in the next couple of weeks, we've got Christmas coming up and getting in the way a little bit, but in the next week or two we will be sharing sort of details on how people can contribute to this process, and I'm sure we'll be setting up plenty more sessions for people to input ideas. Hopefully at some point there'll be an opportunity to do some of that in person as well as online, because I know a lot of people want the opportunity to have some face-to-face engagement too. So as soon as we're in a position to do that, we will. But until then, there's plenty of ways that you can contact the council via email, via social media, and via the Commonplace site. So I hope that's given you a useful overview of what's coming next, and happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Joe. That's an incredibly helpful presentation. Could I just ask you to mute your microphone because there's a bit of an echo? Thanks, Joe. Liz,
can I just ask Joe to clarify, in terms of commenting on the 2 filters that are in place at the moment? I know that because I've had a lot of casework queries about it. The Commonplace site for those is closed at the moment, and the website directs you to the Be Heard consultation page on the traffic regulation order. So can you just confirm that? Because I want to make sure that people feel that they've still got the chance to feed their views in on that.
Sure. Yeah, because the experimental traffic regulation orders for those measures are now sort of sealed and in place, there is a formal consultation period that occurs within the first 6 months of the ETRO. So we've put that onto the Birmingham Be Heard site, because that's where the council does usually sort of host its formal consultations. But anyone who does want to make comments or objections can do so through that, and there is a direct link from the Commonplace site. Where we've used Commonplace previously, it's been more around some of the initial engagement and seeking sort of early feedback on concept designs and sort of early feedback. Anything that has been submitted has already sort of been downloaded, is being included as part of the review, and those comments will inform some of the sort of future design brief. I think what we'll also look to do is in the next couple of weeks relaunch a Bournville Places for People page on Commonplace, but more around the next steps and what other things people would like to see in the area. Because I think what we find Commonplace is particularly useful for is that sort of an initial early engagement, and then Birmingham Be Heard is where we host the more formal consultation elements.
Thank you, Joe, and thanks for answering the question, Joe. I'm really glad to hear. I think for whatever our views of the initiatives that we've seen in our community, one of the challenges has been about how we communicate and consult, and so I'm really glad to hear the strengthening of that, particularly in the phase 2 work, plans. So thank you for that, Joe. I've got a couple of things to work through on the chat box. Let me just see if. Some of these, I think Liz and I are going to need to take at the end of the meeting. So we've got an issue around the Robert Clinic on Station Road. Liz is going to give an update on that later in the meeting. The high over Bright Maryvale streetlights, I think we can also take that one under councillors update as well, because I need to understand a little bit more about that. One thing that I raised as part of the issues that were raised with me about the Franklin Road and the Oak Tree Lane initiatives was the issue of accessibility, particularly around for wheelchair users. I think I'm still awaiting a kind of response on that, but I think we've got it would be good to make sure that we are doing our best to ensure in terms of equality impact assessments and accessibility on all of these initiatives. That's going to be a priority for phase 2 as well, I understand.
It is, absolutely. I mean, it's also one of the 4 key themes of the review of the current programme. So looking at some of those sort of impacts. There was an equality impact assessment done on the programme at the initial stage, but we are sort of continuing to strengthen that. I mean, I think one of the key things is that with these measures, nothing that's introduced restricts access. So people who need to drive to the shops, to health services, etc., are still able to do so. It's just sometimes by different routes. I think also where we've put the modal filters in, we have sort of looked at the locations to ensure that they're not causing any sort of obstruction. And I know there was some questions around Franklin Road and making sure that where the dropped curbs were, that people were still able to cross at that location, that has been checked, and as far as I'm aware, that's all right, but I'm happy to sort of look at that further if people are raising specific access issues. But I think also it's sort of recognising that not everyone with disabilities or mobility impairments gets around by private vehicle, and there are plenty of people with disabilities who get around on bike or by mobility scooter, and those people will benefit from these schemes just as much. So where we are reducing through traffic and creating more pleasant environments for people to walk and cycle, that is benefiting people in mobility scooters with pushchairs or prams, etc. as well. So it's really, really important that those sorts of accessibility issues are taken into consideration, but also involving those people in the engagement process so they can inform what measures are needed to support them.
Thanks, Joe. Liz, did you want to come in on that one?
Yeah, I've noticed a few. The question, I think, the recent one from Danielle from Langley's Road about what the coverage of these schemes will be, and I think that we are both ward councillors for Bournville and Cotteridge ward, which is a large ward which encompasses both parts of the B29 and B31 postcodes and B30. So I think we very much want to, in the second phase of this, make sure that that we can spread the benefits of taking measures to reduce traffic through our neighbourhoods. Because I'm very clear that this whole the direction of travel is to reduce the amount of car journeys going across our ward. And we've got a big issue in Birmingham that 25% of car journeys are for distances of less than a mile, and often they're being undertaken by a single person in a vehicle. So anything that we can do to encourage people to walk and cycle, it will improve the environment, it will reduce carbon emissions, and it will reduce air pollution. But I suppose, as far as I understand it from what I've learned from Joe and his colleagues, that the amount of money that will be awarded to schemes in Birmingham, is the detail of that is still being worked out. So I suppose I don't yet fully understand how much resource is available to do anything. But I did notice from the slide at the end that there's possibility to consider a low traffic neighbourhood, but also a wider range of measures, and I think that gives us more flexibility and more scope than maybe that we had in the first phase. And to be perfectly honest, for me it was quite frustrating that in the first phase we could only consider the 2 pilot measures on 2 isolated streets, because I think that trying to do something which has an impact on the whole area and a much wider set of streets would be really good, because I do think there's an issue that some people will feel that they're not getting any benefit out of these schemes. So I do understand the reason for that question.
Thanks, Liz. Yeah, and I think just to echo that, if I see in the chat that we've got lots of suggestions of areas to go forward with. Middleton Hall Road's being mentioned. You mentioned Langley's Road. We've seen Whole Lane in there as well. I would encourage anybody who wants to engage with us on this issue to email Liz and myself with your ideas. I think that we'd be very happy to take those forward and to make sure they're included in the discussion and think those through. I've had some conversations with residents in Oak Tree Lane, Sellywood Road kind of area as well. Also in Katie Road, Elliott Road, those kind of areas up there about traffic calming measures as well. I know that a lot of since we started doing something about this, a lot of neighbourhoods have recognised just how helpful and this could be to our communities, particularly given the amount of, for me, rat running that's coming, where people are cutting through our residential streets to go onto other journeys and driving badly and causing causing real danger to our residents. I think, Joe, I know you've been looking in at the chat and giving some answers as well, specifically to some of the things going forward. I don't think there's any specific questions coming out of the chat other than suggestions, and we will capture those suggestions. I think I'll just double check because I know the chat keeps kind of is live and current. So that's great there, and also I think looking at that, we'll leave that there then, Joe. Is there anything there that you see that you'd like to raise, Joe?
I think just to sort of add to the comments you both made in terms of available funding and approach, I think the one thing that will be different with the next phase is that it will very much be based on taking an area-wide approach. The initial measures were very much intended as sort of early demonstration measures. We were hoping to move into the next phase sooner, but because of the delay on funding, that didn't happen. But I think what's important now is that we do look at this very holistically. It's looking across a whole area. What we don't want to do is just move a problem from one street to another or displace traffic issues elsewhere. We want to look to address this across the patch. There will be more funding available than last time, but I think the reality is we'll never have enough to do absolutely everything that's needed or wanted. But I think if we sort of use the starting point as that area-wide vision and the various changes people want to see, there will be an opportunity to bring bits of that forward through the next phase, but also through the council's Transport and Highways Capital Programme and opportunities to secure other external funding. Hopefully there will be more funding for walking and cycling from central government over the coming year. I think what we sort of do is, by creating that vision for what we want to see, we're in a very good position for any additional funding that does become available or anything else we are able to secure. So we should be able to do something that's much more sort of holistic and area wide.
Thank you, Joe. Really appreciate it and look forward to further updates and to working with you on this. I'm just going to double check. So there might be some comments on there that you want to continue to engage with Joe as we continue. Liz, did you want to raise any particular issues with regard to this item, or shall we move on to the next item?
No, only to reiterate that that people should feed in their comments via the Commonplace site, and also look out for updates on Facebook and social media from Birmingham Connected, because I think we do want to hear people hear people's ideas and suggestions. And certainly if we're going to an area-wide approach or a low-traffic neighbourhood, we need to understand what people will think will work in their local area. So, and obviously Fred and I have had a very large volume of emails and phone calls and contacts about this, and that's that's what we're here for, to hear people's comments about that. So please get in touch if you have concerns.
Thanks, Liz. Thanks, Joe. We're going to move on to the next item now, but I just wanted to again flag up some of the stuff on some of the conversation in the chat. Do add into the chat if you're listening and have got a question or something. So one of the things, a question from Danielle at Langley's Road is, do police still have night patrols in our area? I've messaged the Bournville police team. They were going to try and join us tonight, but I think technology is probably preventing them. So we'll make sure we get you an update, Danielle, on that. What the current plan is for night patrols in the Bournville area, particularly over the winter months and the Christmas period. We've had suggestions about other potential items for future meetings. So we've got one resident has raised the issue of EU citizens living in the ward to make sure they get their settled status and what the council's doing about that. Liz has put a link in the chat showing what the council is doing, and so if there's further questions on that, do get in touch with us via email. And then we've got items that I've mentioned already about.
Greg, can I just say on that?
Yeah. Go ahead, Liz.
Just in regard to the EU settled status scheme, I think that the council's deputy leader, Councillor Bridget Jones, who's leading a lot of the work on the council's response to Brexit. She's been in that. What I've included in the link is a letter that she sent out urging people to apply, but also if you have friends or family who need to apply through the settled status scheme, please do your part and encourage them, because I think that there is a major concern that we have large numbers of EU citizens who are our friends, neighbours and families, and they need to apply but I think it's by next June in order to get this status, and obviously the whole end of the transition phase, we talked already about the economic uncertainty, but I think for people's sort of residency and nationality status, it's also going to be hugely uncertain if they don't get their settled status sorted out. So thank you very much, Chris, for raising that question. I think it's really important for all of us to help those that that are in our friends and families and workplaces to make sure that they apply for the status within the deadlines. Thanks,
Liz. Important message there, and you've put the link in the chat as well. So do follow that link through. I think then, Liz, if that's okay with you, I think if we invite Cheryl from Bournville Village Trust to give us a bit of an update on what's been happening community-wise. I know that Cheryl has been working with you and I, Liz, on bringing together our community organisations on a regular monthly call to link together and link up with each other to share what we've been up to and how we can work together. And the amazing things continue to happen in our community as a result of all the brilliant community organisations we have. Cheryl, one of the things that I think with BVT has been the fantastic online Christmas activities and programme of online Christmas activities involving Christmas lights and various other exciting things. So can I ask you to give us a bit of an update of what BVT are doing and also what you know about wider community organisations? Because I know that BVT have been engaged with lots of different initiatives in the current period, both to help us to celebrate Christmas in these difficult times, but also to work with organisations that are supporting those that are in need of help and the vulnerable in our community.
Absolutely. Just checking you, first of all, you can hear me okay?
I can certainly hear you. That's brilliant.
Excellent. Right. Yeah. So I suppose just a couple of key updates. The big thing, particularly for the people who are really familiar about the traditions of Bournville, the Christmas festival went online this year. We switched on the Christmas lights last Saturday. There is actually a Bournville Christmas Festival.co.uk. That's Bournville Christmas Festival, all the full words.co.uk, and there's a whole series of contributions from local churches, from local groups. We've got choirs, we've got dad jokes, a whole range of things. So if you fancy just connecting with it and having something a bit Christmassy, please do that. We also, as part of our sort of reflections on 2020, and I think this is a year that we will in the future be saying, do you remember 2020, do you remember these things? And we were thinking as an organisation, what are the things that we can do? Well, one of the things that we're really privileged to be at the heart of lots of people's connections and community, and we've had a number of organisations and individuals offer fantastic support to people that are isolated and to families and children across our communities. So one of the people, Joe Higgins, each year Joe collects across the community and puts together what she calls smile bags for families and lonely residents. We've been working with Joe and members of our team are to identify people who just are in need of a smile or something to bring a bit of light into their day. So we're distributing just over 50 gifts and parcels to families and individuals across the community. We've also had a fantastic donation of support from Riverside Church, who will be offering to take lunches out to people on Christmas Day for people that are on their own. On that particular one, if you are aware of people who are going to be on their own at Christmas who you think would really benefit from having somebody nice and pleasant come and arrive with a hot meal for them, please get in touch with Riverside Churches, or you can get in touch with us. We'll share my details at the end of my input, by all means. And there are other things that people are doing. There are churches that are offering things along the way. So as much as this has been an incredibly difficult year, one of the things that has absolutely shone very brightly is people's ability to be generous, to be supportive, to be accommodating, to be charitable, and to be very compassionate. And I suppose at the moment we're bathed in a lot of that compassion because of the conversations we're having across the community. The third thing to share is our winter campaign. This campaign came together really quickly on the back of a couple of emails between our housing team and our communities team. And what we felt was that we needed to offer some real practical support for people that might be experiencing financial challenges. And these are our residents, so people who live in any area that's managed by BVT, or our tenants. It's not just tenants, it's residents as well. And what we're offering is a range of practical support for people who enter financial difficulties. We've got a really useful set of referral sort of guide on our website, and that particular guide has other support. So if their mental health is a little bit sort of challenged, there are places they can contact. We've got a number of charities whose details are listed there. What we anticipate is that people will stretch for Christmas. They will beg, borrow, steal, go without. And when the real consequence of particularly economic challenge will hit January, February, March. And so we're preparing ourselves for those things. We have available food vouchers for families and individuals, fuel vouchers for families and individuals. And if somebody, and the fuel vouchers are for people who are on prepayment meters. So if somebody is just paying their bill, we can make discretionary payments of around £50 to help them pay for their bills. The other thing we've given some flexibility to do is to help people with essential costs. So I saw a bit of an email exchange the other day, and it was just somebody who hadn't bought a coat for herself for the winter, and we've had a team of staff from across the organisation who've had some training to make some very specialised calls to people. We've identified people in our networks who we think might be a bit more vulnerable. We're doing a bit of a check to see where they are now. We're asking them where they're going to be next year, but we're also asking them, let's say it's a family, and they'll say, oh no, I've got all the kids' coats and the hats, and like, have you got your coat sorted? Because we know that often people will go without. So the discretionary payments are for small things, whether it's an electric blanket, a little heater, and through our community fund, which is something is made available to our tenants, we can help people with larger essential purchases. So that's like if the fridge went. We don't anticipate making lots of those, but what we've tried to do is to create something that actually feels supportive, that it's a quick turnaround, and often people are contacting us and actually getting information back on getting their vouchers, their support on the same day. We've got a very simple email for people to access it. It's called well@bvt.co.uk. So it's just our email end and well at the front. You can call us on our mainline number. We've got some staff who are ready to take calls on that. And also you can visit our website for further details. And the website does have quite a lot of the information on it. And we have been getting leaflets and flyers out to target communities, so areas in Shenley, a few bits around Northfield, we've got bits around Cotteridge, we've got bits around Bournville, and also for households that we know that are having some challenges. So that's the Well Winter campaign. I'm happy to take any questions if there are any that have come through the chat.
Thanks, Cheryl. Thank you very much for that update and all of those amazing things that are happening in the community, and obviously that challenge that is ahead of us as we go into the new year. Really appreciate that, and I think Kay's put the link to the Bournville Christmas Festival website in there.
Brilliant, thank you.
Any other links, just put those in the chat, and it'd be great to get this to people. And I had a quick look at the Bournville Christmas Festival, and I can't find these dad jokes, so you'll have to send me a link to them, because I had one. Did you hear that production was down at Santa's workshop? And this is because many of his workers have had to elf isolate. I thought that was quite a funny one.
Wow. We didn't have that one.
Enough jokes. That's my attempts at being a radio presenter again. Stop it, Fred. Really appreciate that. Sure. One thing I did want to do was update on Cotteridge as well. So we've had, thanks to a bit of support from BVT as well. There is now a Cotteridge Christmas tree, and it's gone up today, and some lights as well. And this is the first time that I think we've had lights and Christmas tree in Cotteridge for about 3 to 4 years. So a real achievement of local community organisations up there. And I've got an update on that. So business, faith and community groups, and working with myself and Liz, have worked together to provide a Christmas tree and lights for Cotteridge. And the tree was donated by the Bournville Garden Centre. Was decorated thanks to donations from the Tending to Cotteridge group, the Cotteridge Church, Cotteridge Quaker meeting, and some local community funds, as well as the Christmas lights have been installed from generous support from the Central England Co-op Community Fund. So I want to really thank everyone that's been involved in the Christmas decorations at Cotteridge, which is a real achievement. And I know, having worked with those that were involved in that project, we now know how to get a Christmas tree installed. So in a main centre. So I think that's something that we can make sure happens every year from now on. And thanks to BVT for your support for that as well. There's loads going on. There's loads going on, and I know your website is being updated really regularly with with all the support and information that's out there as well.
It is.
Liz, did you want to come in on that item?
Only just briefly to say that I echo the comment from the person who's posting as anonymous, that it was a fantastic afternoon on Saturday afternoon, and the duo of Gary Bennett, the Master of Ceremonies, and Reverend Gale, the curate, and that was amazing. And they've definitely got the potential for a radio show, I'd have thought. And yeah, there were some good jokes and some really terrible ones, but it was all in the spirit of sort of Christmas cracker jokes and mottos. And I thought the singers and musicians that we heard were fantastic, in lots of different groups, including the Bournville Youth Choir, the Acorn Singers, and lots of really talented young people doing solo acts. You know, I was absolutely in awe of them because I'm a musician myself, and yet the confidence of the people who performed was just really inspiring. So I thought, really enjoyed that afternoon. And obviously we all know that the tree on the green is, I'd say it's the best in the city, but it's beautiful, and it's something that we can all see online now, as well as walking or going past it. So thanks very much to everyone who was involved there, BVT, the village council, and all the volunteers who were involved. And again, just to say, thanks to Tending to Cotteridge and everyone who's involved in getting the Christmas tree up in Cotteridge, and thanks to Fred, because Fred, I think, done a lot of work to help the groups get the money together to fund the tree and the cost of the electricity. So a great development. And I think just over the pandemic, we've seen the value of having such a great range of community organisations in our neighbourhoods, and obviously we've all got the concern about what's going to happen in the next few months. Obviously furlough has been extended, but we know that there's going to be a further hit with people at risk of losing their jobs or losing employment, and being more in need of support and advice and assistance. So really, I just to say, don't hesitate to come forward and ask for help if you need it. Cheryl's outlined what's on offer from Bournville Village Trust, and there's a range of other organisations that we can signpost you to. It's like the projects in Longbridge, or the various food banks and other sources of particularly financial advice. And then there's the ARC in Billesley, which is the area-wide source of support for young families. So please, we know that it's difficult times for everybody, and do ask for help, because we know that we all need it. And there are also people who are suffering the trauma of bereavement and the mental health strain of the isolation that we've all gone through. So again, there are a number of sources of support and advice that are being offered by the council and by different NHS organisations and the hospices around our area. So do try and keep in touch with those sources of advice, and if you get in touch with myself and Fred as councillors, we can signpost, as can Cheryl and her colleagues at BVT.
Can I just add one extra thing? One of the things is there's two things that we've included in this campaign. One is obviously trying to get ahead of the challenge. So if you are aware of people, I'd like to think that we can help people steer themselves away from needing food banks and other types of support through having a look at debt and some of those other things. But the other thing we're doing is we're regularly updating our jobs page, because there are employers who are still recruiting. There's currently quite a mammoth NHS recruitment for people to cover the logistics for the coronavirus delivery of the vaccine. And obviously Birmingham is going to be even a bigger challenge, because we are the largest municipal authority in Europe. So, people are saying, why hasn't Birmingham started? Part of it is a logistical challenge to get all of those centres up and running with the right staff. If you are aware, there are part-time opportunities as well as full-time roles. If you are aware of people who may need to top up their income, have a bit of extra time, please do look at some of the opportunities that are coming out of QE Hospital, because they appear to be coordinating the recruitment for across the Birmingham area, and there's also those jobs available in the Black Country as well. So just a heads up around job opportunities as well.
Thanks, Cheryl. That's really helpful, really good advice. I've got a question from the chat, Cheryl, saying, what can residents do to support the work that you're doing on the Well Winter programme?
Oh, that's really helpful. One of the things you can do is tell people about it. That's one of the first things. And if you're aware of somebody, and even if just encourage them to give us a call, we'll have people who can talk them through on things. We're quite fortunate that in addition to some of the resources we've put into it, we've also had indication of support for the Cotteridge family. They're still very invested in the work that we do and are up for supporting things. So right now, the best thing people can do is know about the campaign, have a look on our website, become familiar about it, because the person that you might know who needs it may not be might not be able to access it. Encourage people to make contact with us, or just look at the information on it, because there might be someone that they can contact before speaking to us. And really just keep your eyes open, particularly when we hit January, February, because as Liz says, I think that's when things are going to become very tricky and people are really going to need some support.
Thanks, Cheryl. That's really, really great advice, and that the question was from Rosalind. So thank you very much, Rosalind, for asking that question.
Brilliant.
Cheryl, thanks very much for joining us. We've managed to
problem.
get you into the meeting, which I think has been a challenge about getting external guests into the meeting, the technology wise. So I think we've all, it's been great to have you with us as well.
Fantastic.
I hope that you guys from BVT, yourself or your colleagues, will be able to join us for future ward forums now that we made
Definitely, just send me an invite and I'll try and make it. Definitely.
Thanks ever so much for your time today. Really
no
appreciate
problem.
that.
Take care.
Thanks, Cheryl. The final items that we have for today are an update, a councillor's update, but I just wanted to let people know that we have tried to invite the local police team in. It hasn't worked the technology wise. I know there are a couple of questions related to police related issues in the chat. Liz and I will take those away. If one of those questions has been asked by someone anonymous, if you want to, whoever's asked that question, if you want to email it to Liz and I, we will get you a full response from the local police team on that issue. Liz, there's a couple of items in the chat, and I know there's some other things that you want to talk about as well in terms of a wider councillors update. One of those items in the chat is streetlights in Merivale Road. So I'll hand over to you to perhaps update on that and some of the other issues and a wider councillors activity, and then I'll chip in at the end.
Thanks, Fred. Yes, so a couple of items there. So firstly, on the new street lighting, which is being installed across the ward. I know it's on Franklin Road and various other roads that I've noticed from the daily walks, which are now increasingly taking place on my part at dusk or into the evening. On Merivale Road, I know that residents waited a long time to have the street lighting upgraded. So if you have got concerns about the level, the level of light, the level of luminescence, or I think there is the option to have a shield on the street lighting. So I put into the chat the link so where you can report concerns about street lighting online. Alternatively, email me. My email address is the standard BCC one, so it's liz.clements@birmingham.gov.uk. I've already dealt with a lot of inquiries and complaints about the lighting on Merivale Road, so happy to pass on queries. Obviously, the lighting upgrades are done by Kia, which is the highways contractor, which is now the contractor for the council. And I assume that the lighting columns, they are a standard specification. Certainly the ones that I've seen on Franklin Road are the same as the ones on Merivale Road. So I don't know whether it's possible to vary the height of them. I mean, I would say, as somebody who's been, well, I can't drive, so I've lived in Birmingham since 1999 as a pedestrian and fair weather cyclist. And for me, the new lights are good because just the level of illumination is good if you're walking on the street, particularly as a woman on your own. Because I remember years of returning from Merivale Station, along Merivale Road from Bournville Station, and just being frankly a bit afraid because the lighting was so dingy. However, I do understand that the new LED lights are extremely bright, and if you've got one directly outside your front window, that it's causing light pollution. So I think that in Merivale Road, the installation, as I say, has been waited for years, but it did happen last week, and the level of light is now drastically different. It's much brighter. So I think that there are some tweaks that need to be done by Kia, the lighting consultancy. But overall, I'm glad it's been done, and I hope that that we'll see upgrading in the rest of the ward, because as some of you may be aware, for a long time the council was in dispute with the previous highway contractors, Amy, and it was very difficult to get anything done in terms of pothole repairs, pavements, street lighting upgrades. And I think at the moment the contract arrangements being delivered by Kia are working out much better. So I feel a bit more optimistic about our chances of getting improvements and sorting out the difficulties there. Just moving on then, if it's okay, Rosalind, I think, is raised the questions about the ongoing protest outside the British Pregnancy Advisory Clinic on Station Road. And as Rosalind knows, I've been engaging with residents and the BPAS and police and a range of stakeholders, including Steve McCabe, our MP, and Birmingham City Council's community safety team, to look at what we can do really to safeguard the clients going into the clinic, and that going in often accompanied by family members or friends who are often are feeling harassed by the presence of the protesters and sometimes actually are being approached. I agree that it raises all sorts of issues and contradictions in relation to the present social distancing requirements and COVID, and we're doing all that we can to work closely with the police to contain the situation and to look at longer term measures. So what I would say to people, if you're concerned about this, particularly if you're a resident on Franklin Road or Station Road, please get in touch with Birmingham Community Safety Team and let them know about your concerns. And I think Rosalind and her neighbours have set up a residents group on the street, so that they've got the contact details for Birmingham Community Safety Team. There is a generic email address which I can share in the chat after I finish speaking, if I can recover it from my email. Because what we're now looking into is the potential to have something called a public space protection order outside the clinic entrance to stop people loitering on the pavement outside and making a protest. And so it would be effectively a barrier zone outside the clinic. But for the council to move forward on that and enact that piece of legislation under antisocial behaviour legislation, we need to make a legal case, and we know from other councils where they've taken that as an option in this situation. You need a very large evidence base, so we need as many people who are concerned about it to share their concerns. And as we learned at the recent meeting with residents, the police and community safety, a public space protection order, is quite a lengthy process. The council needs to establish a residence base, based on the impact on local. An evidence base, based on the impact on residents and their day-to-day lives. And then there will be a formal consultation process in which all stakeholders involved, including the protesters, will be consulted. So the recent protests have been organised by an organisation called 40 Days for Life, and they are an international protest movement. I think they've moved into the UK from the US, and they are quite well resourced and well organised. So they understand their rights in terms of the freedom to protest and their civil liberties in terms of protest. So we've got to go through all of the appropriate legal steps. But the first thing is to collect evidence. So again, maybe Rosalind could indicate on the chat, but I know that as far as I understand it, the Birmingham Community Safety Team are working on a survey, an antisocial behaviour survey, which they're going to distribute to residents with the support of the police. I don't know whether that's happened yet, but if it hasn't, I can certainly send some chaser messages about that. But I am very concerned about that situation, and perhaps some people listening will have seen that Steve McCabe did raise a question about this demonstration in Parliament during Home Office questions to Priti Patel, and he described it as an unwarranted harassment of women and their relatives and loved ones going into the clinic to seek medical procedures. So I think that we do need to do something about this situation. We're trying to take action, but it's quite a lengthy process. So please help us do it. And I share your frustrations, Rosalind.
Thanks, Liz. And I think Rosalind's posted in the chat that she wants to make it clear that the residents group are not pro-choice or pro-life; they're anti-harassment. So thank you, Rosalind, for raising that question in the work that you're doing. And you're going to have a website as well that they'll share with local Facebook groups. Liz, are there any other items that you wanted to update the Ward Forum on in terms of other issues that have come your way?
Well, one other issue that's been a long-running issue of concern to residents on Linden Road, Beaumont Road and Franklin Road is that access on Beaumont Road to the allotments. And again, I had a recent meeting with representatives of Birmingham Property Services and Birmingham Housing, who are actually the owners of the site. And it's an issue that we're trying to resolve. I understand the frustration of residents because the access to the allotments has been closed off since December 2019 because of concerns that the buildings on the site, which is owned by the council, are in very poor repair and are actually starting to fall apart, and so there's a safety issue. But that's a situation that's now gone on for almost a year, so we're trying to resolve it. But it is, at the moment, it's a matter of looking at what the council's plans are for that site, and I think they're looking at rent or leasing out the site again and demolishing the current buildings. But there is also a process of looking at the the question of the legal right of way across the site, and at the moment it's unclear whether there is actually an established right of way. I mean, that to me, I think I can share residents' puzzlement at that, because it's clearly been used as an informal right of way for decades if you talk to residents on the street, but that's something that we're trying to resolve. And otherwise, I'd say that over the last few months, the casework has been really dominated by trying to help people who need support through the COVID pandemic, been helping individual residents, but also helping local businesses to access the business grants that have been made available. And that's just to sort of flag up to people that there is now a second round of business support grants that you can find information about on the council's website. So please, don't hesitate to come forward if you think your business is eligible for one of those grants. The information is there on the council's website. It's also been promoted on the council's social media sites on Twitter and Facebook. And again, we really talked about it earlier in the meeting, but dealing with a lot of casework and inquiries in relation to the two traffic filters, and also the wider plans for measures to reduce traffic through Bournville and Cotteridge and the part of Selly Oak that we represent.
Thanks, Liz, and thanks for that update. If you've got any other questions for Liz or myself, do put them in the chat, because we're almost coming to the end of the meeting. I've got a couple of very quick updates. Update one, Valley Parkway, the boating pool. So that's been drained, and we've got structural work going on there. We've been working with the Bournville Radio and Model Boating Club to ensure that the essential repairs are being carried out there, and I think that's what's happening down there. So I appreciate everyone that's been kind of involved in making that happen. We've also got our community call. Cheryl mentioned it earlier. We do a community call at least once a month for community organisations that want to get together to talk about, share ideas and share what's happening and share how we can respond in the community. If you'd like to be involved in that community, if your organisation would like to be involved in that community call, send me an email or Liz an email. We'll get you the invite and for you to join that. I think we've not got any more questions in the Q&A. I think, Liz, there aren't any other major issues to raise. We have been in touch. The police team has emailed us to say that they would be keen to join the next meeting, and they've taken our questions away with them that have been posted in the chat. So we'll get some answers for people there, and hopefully we'll get the technology working. But Liz, I think that's probably a good point to bring the meeting to a close, and to wish everyone a good Christmas and Happy New Year. And we'll look forward to seeing everybody in 2021, where we recognise we've got some big challenges, but it does, with the news about the vaccine, it does feel like the future, is bright, and we've got some challenges ahead, but some positive news to go into the Christmas period with. Liz, any final points from you?
Well, just to say that I think the traditional carol singing on the green on Christmas Eve, that will be online, will be a virtual event this year. And again, there's information about that on the various Facebook sites and on social media. And it's really important that people don't gather in the way that we would normally be doing. It's a wonderful tradition that we've got on, but we obviously it's had to be modified this year to be compliant with all the tier 3 restrictions and COVID. And likewise on New Year's Eve, I know lots of us like the Carillion recital that's on, or Carry On recital that Trevor Workman does on New Year's Eve. It's always a highlight for me. But again, it's something that I think we'll have to enjoy virtually this year. So I'd like to say happy Christmas and good New Year to everybody. Thanks for everyone who's tuned in and all the questions. If we haven't got to your question and you've got something which is a burning issue, please get in touch and we will endeavour to deal with it as fast as we can. But thanks very much for taking the time to be with us this evening. And yes, have a very happy and peaceful Christmas, and stay safe, everyone.
Thanks, Liz, and I echo those messages. We'll be back in touch early in the new year. I think these online ward forums have worked really well. I think we'll be looking to do one in the first quarter of next year. And if there's any issues that people need support with, or anything you want to get in touch with, do get in touch with Liz and myself over that period. We'd be keen to help you. And I echo Liz's comments, wishes of a good Christmas and Happy New Year. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.